What's up, Infected? It's Wolf with the Quarantine, and today I have a game for you that's coming to Kickstarter by the name of Arkham Ritual. Now, this game will be coming to Kickstarter, and if you like what you see in this video, I will have a link up here when it is available that'll take you directly to that Kickstarter, and they will be able to provide way more information than I'll be able to possibly cover here. So, what is Arkham Ritual? Well, Arkham Ritual is brought to you by Ninja Star Games, and it is a game where basically you are all the characters actually, or all the players are investigators that kind of stumbled on a ritual going down, to appease an old god or whatnot. It's Lovecraftian themed, and you're trying to make it out alive and not go completely insane, and that's essentially the game. And then everybody's kind of got these hidden roles. But it works kind of weird. It works similar to Hanabi, where you will never see the card that's in front of you, but you will see everybody else's card around the table. And then you have to deduce by what everybody has and what everybody else's actions are about what you have, and when the game ends, and whole nine yards. And it winds up boiling down to whoever's still alive at the end of the game wins. That's really the best way I have to describe the game, so let's just go straight over to how the game's played, shall we? Alright, before I continue, as usual, I have to state that this is a review, it is not a tutorial, so I'm not going to be able to cover all of the rules here, and I may make a few rules mistakes. The other thing being, everything you see here is of course a prototype copy of the game, so everything that you see here is of course subject to change if you do back the project when you receive it. Okay, and how you set the game up is it's very simple. You're going to put your insanity cubes, or insanity nuggets, I guess you can call them. You're going to set those in the middle of the table where everybody can reach them. You're also going to have the deck of cards in the middle of the table where everybody can reach them, and then space for like a discard pile. And then you are going to deal everybody one card. I should note, for the purpose of this review, I do have them in little card stands here, but of course those will not be included in the game, as far as I am aware of anyways. So you have your card here that when you draw, you will draw it, and you will hold it just like this. That way you cannot see it, but you are able to see everybody else's card. And then you're going to decide who the active player is going to be. And whoever the active player is going to be is going to draw one card from this middle, and you're going to look at it. I'm going to explain what these cards are in a minute, but you're going to look at it, and you're going to decide who is going to get this card, who you're going to offer it to. So then you're going to put it face down, and you're going to go, would you like to take this card? And at this point in time, everybody has got one hand on the table, except for the active player. So this person has their hand out. I would ask them, would you like this card? They have two options. They can go ahead and take the card, and if they do, they would discard their card face up so everybody can see it, and then they would take this. Note, they don't get to look at this card, they just have to trust what I'm telling them. And then they would put it face up like this. Again, they still have no idea what that card is, and everybody else does. Their other option is, if I were to ask them for this card, they would take their hand off the table and say, no, I would not like this card. Then they, without looking at the card still, would offer it to somebody else and go, would you like this card? And then they would get the same choices. If they say no, they would also take their hand off the table and go, would you like this card? And so on and so forth. And that's going to happen until either somebody takes the card and discards their card and puts this face up, or not face up, but in their hand so everybody can see, or until everybody denies the card. At that point, the game, or the round, is over, which I'll touch on more shortly. Now, the game has some special roles. So if you notice, there's some red cards, and there's a bunch of blue cards. Unless otherwise stated, at the end of the game, however the game may end, red cards are going to die. Any cards that are identical, so you got the pocket watch and the pocket watch, they would die. And that would also be, for example, let's see if I can find it in here. Unless I have it. Okay, the pocket watch here, even though it's red, because this, I'm dying no matter what, but this pocket watch would also trigger, say if this one wasn't here, would also trigger this pocket watch, so they would also die. So you're having to deduce, who's got what while looking around the table and not knowing what you are. But then there's a couple additional ones. You have the investigator, that if they are still alive at the end of the game, of course their symbol doesn't match anybody, or their picture doesn't match anything, they would just gain a sanity, which I'll get to momentarily. Then you have the elder sign, Whoever has the Elder Sign, if it's ever discarded face up throughout the course of the game, it immediately ends, no questions asked. You have the two gates, which I'll get to in a second. You have, where is the other one? Let's see, you have the magical orb. If this is ever discarded, whoever discarded that gets to look at the next card and decide whether it's removed from the game face down or whether or not they're going to put it back on top. So they will know what this card is that's going to be offered to the next person. Then, last but not least, you have... Well, not last but not least, I'll get to this one in a minute, but you have Cthulhu. Now, Cthulhu is works a little is kind of interesting. If one of the gates are ever discarded and Cthulhu is one of the cards that are being revealed, then the game also immediately ends. Cthulhu loses no sanity, and everybody else loses sanity equal to the number of players minus 2. So it's kind of a big deal. Then, last but not least, you have the cultist. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, red cards will always be dead, unless the cultist is alive at the end of the game. So if this person, rather than being a stopwatch, this person was a cultist, and the game wound up ending because everybody denied a card or whatever reason, then, of course, the cultist would die, because the cultist is a blue card, but because the cultist was alive at the end of the game, instead, blue cards die, and red cards are now alive. So these two players would, well, this one wouldn't. This player would win, because these two would kill each other, because they're both pocket watches. You have the investigator, which is blue, so he would die. The cultist would die. This would be the only person that's still left alive. And that's really how the game is played. So once, for the most part, so there's a couple last little things here. Once a round is over, you calculate how many people died. So everybody that died is going to lose sanity equal to the number of people that died. So in my example here, if it ended like this and somebody discarded, I don't know, let's say they discarded the Elder Sign, and the game is over, the cultist dies, Pocket Watch and this one dies because they're both pocket watches, and this one dies. So it's 4 people, so each one of them would gain 4 insanity, which I will talk on this a little bit more. So each one of these are insanity. You start out with 7 sanity. Once you gain 7 insanity, then you're dead. So essentially, once you get 7 of these, you're dead. So they would gain 4. They would gain 4, and this one would gain 4. Now the difference between the red and the white is these count as 3, these count as 1. Now something we were doing when we were playing, just because it was a little more intuitive and felt a little more reasonable, and I have spoken to the designer about it, is we were using these as these were your sanity. So instead, I would start with 7 sanity, and as the game goes on, I would lose the sanity. Once you lose yours, you're dead. Now, the game is going to continue doing that until one person has lost all of their sanity. Once one person has lost all of their sanity, the game is over, and everybody that still has sanity left wins. And that is essentially Arkham Ritual. So let's just go straight to my final thought, shall we? Alright, Arkham Ritual. Well, I should probably start off by saying when I first got the game in the mail, I was pretty stoked to try it out. I love Lovecraftian themed games. I don't know a lot of the lore. I actually don't like the books or any of the writings because I find them super dry. But I'm a fan of the mythos itself. My brother was, and a lot of the people who tried this are as well. And so I was pretty stoked to play that. And as a lot of you guys may know, I love hidden traitor games. I love any game that I have to use deduction and try to figure certain things out, because it brings just an element of personality to the game, I guess. It brings you into the game more because you're having to think about all these things that are going on in the game, and okay, who, using the confines of the game, what could this be or who could this be? And I love that in games. It really draws me in. But so this game I was pretty stoked to try. And so we got together, we sat down, we tried to figure out how to play using these rules. And we had no idea how to play. This rule book that was sent to me was not very well written. A lot of inconsistencies, a lot of things that just don't make a lot of sense. They mention things in weird places, and they mix up a lot of different words, especially game end, game round, and game turn are put in really weird, bizarre places that don't make a lot of sense. So I thought it was just me, so I handed the rules to everybody else at the table and let them try to figure it out. One of which being a professional proofreader for websites. And none of them could figure out exactly how to play the game. So we packed it up, we played other things, and I figured I'll get in touch with the designer later. So I did. And when I got in touch with the designer, he's a pretty cool guy. I explained to him the issues that we had and explained to him that, we could not, using this, we couldn't understand how to play the game. And once it was all clarified and I told him all the things we had issues with and why it was so hard to understand, he's assured me that they're definitely going to be working on that. And we finally got to the point we could play the game. So I got together a couple days later, and we loved the game. The game is outstanding. Is it some super deep, strategic, intellectual game that's going to give you it's brain-burning game? No, not in the slightest. But the game is super entertaining. It is incredibly fun because the fact that you don't have all of the information to you or available to you. You're looking at everybody else's card and you're figuring out, okay, if the game ends right now, they're dead, that person's dead, that person's dead. Okay, it's my turn to be the active player. I get to look at this card and figure out, okay, they have the Elder Sign. What can I do to try to make sure they discard the card? But then on top of that, you might screw yourself because maybe the card you gave them matches the symbol on your card or something like that. And that's such a fun feeling. And on top of that, in the rules, you are not allowed to discuss this specific card that you have. But other than that, you're allowed to say pretty much anything. So what we were doing is we would say, whether somebody had a red or blue card, because you could be lying, or whether your card matched somebody else's card. Or we would use the term, with great power comes great responsibility, and that usually meant you were getting a card that probably had an activated ability, like if it gets discarded, like an Elder Sign or something. And just you get these funny things going on, because somebody will be offered a card, and they'll look at everybody else and go, do I have a red card? And then like half the table goes, no, you're fine, and the other half goes, yeah, dude, you have a red card. And then that just adds to this dilemma, and it's such a cool dynamic in the game where you have it's kind of like a hidden traitor game, but all of the information is available, and it's such I don't know if that's the right analogy for it, but that's kind of the feeling you get, because like with Hanabi, you don't know your card and it's really stressful and you're just trying to do these match these pairs and stuff, and it's a lot of fun. But this, you only have the one card to deal with, and it's super enjoyable. I highly recommend it. Hopefully they fix the rules. Like I mentioned, the designer has mentioned they do intend on making these rules a lot easier to follow. Now, there are a couple other issues that we did have with the game. The game itself, brilliant, fantastic game. We loved it. Not a whole lot of complaints about that. It would have been nice to maybe have a few more activated abilities, or on the abilities, like, say, the Elder Sign. We felt that the text of what it does should be on the card, because even after a few rounds, maybe it was us, it was late, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that. You're constantly having to go back to the rules and remember, okay, what does that do? But then that lets somebody know that, okay, I have an activated card because they were just looking at my card and now looking at the rules to figure out what this card does and try to remember what it does. And we feel that the text should be on the card. It would just make quality of life improvements. Not that big of a complaint. Now, one of the bigger issues that we had was, again, kind of going back to the rule book. The way the game talks about it says is you start out with 7 sanity, and every time you get one of those cubes, or the whatever you want to call those, those count as insanity. That takes away your sanity. But that feels really convoluted and just way harder to follow than it should be. So what we were doing is we were using them as those are your sanity, and then you lose them, and that made it infinitely easier. Like, we tried to play a game with the way the rules said, and it just felt fiddly and confusing, and it just didn't feel right. But when you have it and you lose it, it's much better. Then the last complaint we had which I've talked to the designer about maybe making it a variant. It felt a lot more fun. Is the game ends when one person loses all of their sanity, and then everybody else that has sanity left just wins. And that while that's fun, we played kind of a house rule and kind of shoehorned it in there where only whoever had the most sanity won. And that wound up being way more stressful and way more tense because, especially if you have two people with the same amount of sanity, or same amount of sanity left, that gets super tense. And I don't know, we enjoyed that a lot more. And even if doesn't become an official rule, there's no reason you can't just play it that way. So, anyways, that is my review for Arkham Ritual. I definitely recommend it. Great little game. And as I mentioned, the designer has stated that he is going to work on that rule book and whole nine yards. So, anyways, if you check out my Patreon right up here, if you like the show, I do have a Twitch and Twitter down in the comment section or in the description as well if you'd like to check those out. Anyways, I will see you guys next time in the quarantine.